This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat. And really excited to start out with a guest that I've been trying to get on for weeks. And listen, he's in high demand. This is ESPN. I think he does NFL. Hey, listen, everybody wants to hear what Jim Nagy has to say about NFL draft prospects. And the reason why is because Jim was an NFL scout with the New England Patriots, with the Green Bay Packers, with the Seattle Seahawks. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but I think he's got Super Bowl rings or appearances with all those teams. And now Jim is the executive director of the Senior Bowl. So that means he still continues to do his own scouting. He's in tune and in touch with all of these collegiate coaches, first name basis. Everybody's got his phone number, and he is one dialed in dude. Jim, thank you very much for joining us tonight on the Ingles on the Beat show.
Yeah, Mike, sorry it's taken a little bit for us to connect here, but glad to come on with you.
Well, it's good timing. As we joked before the show, Jim probably needed 3 weeks just to prep for this show. I mean, there's 14 or 15 Georgia players that could be drafted. The record was set by LSU. The Joe Burrow team had 14 players drafted. Jim, I look at this list and I see 14 dogs with draft grades, maybe 15 if we count John FitzPatrick, a tight end you're familiar with. And, you know, I kind of want to start with FitzPatrick. And the reason why is this. John was a guy who recognized 3 or 4 games into the season that the 5th metatarsal bone in his foot was broken, really in both feet. And rather than stop and get surgery and make sure that he was ready for the NFL evaluation process, which may have included a trip to the Senior Bowl. I don't know. I know he was a guy you looked at, certainly would have included a combine. This is a guy who played with these injuries, knowing that this was going to set him back. Now, Jim, as a former scout, I ask you, how does an NFL team evaluate that sort of effort, performance, sacrifice?
Yeah, teams are going to love the toughness part of what John did and gutted it out and want to be a part of a national championship team. I haven't talked to John. I did talk to him actually, about playing in the Senior Bowl. We had, it was a situation late where we had a tight end go down during the week, Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State, and we're going to add him. So when I called him, that's when he told me about the injuries, but I didn't go at length. It was too busy in the week. I didn't have time for an extended chat with John, but, no, I think the fact that he probably realized something special was going on there in Athens this year and wanted to be a part of it. So speaks to his toughness that he had the pain tolerance to play through it. And he's a late draftable talent. I don't know with the injury now if that's going to happen. I think the biggest thing for John is getting in the right situation, the right opportunity, which is obviously the most critical thing for any day 3 player. Just find the right situation where you got a chance to compete and in a roster situation that looks good. So, but yeah, in terms of talent on the tape, like had he been through the process and come to the Senior Bowl or had a good workouts, I could have seen a team taking him there. I mean, it's a really deep room there in Athens. I mean, you got the freshman who looks like he could be as good as any tight end we've seen in years, and then just a bunch of freaks in that room. I mean, that tight end room's probably arguably as good or better than some NFL tight end rooms. So, John just probably felt the squeeze and felt the need to maybe move on and give the NFL a shot. So, no, he's a talented guy. And obviously playing with 2 Jones fractures in your feet, it's a pretty tough dude.
Yeah, a lot of comparisons to Charlie Warner there. And obviously, Charlie Warner doing pretty good for himself in the NFL. Jim, I think this was year 3. This was year 3 for you at the Senior Bowl. Is that correct?
No, it's year 4. It's going by fast.
Okay, yep. It really has. I still remember meeting you for the first time and just the intensity, the focus that you had for the job and watching how the game's grown and seeing it played at the South Alabama Stadium. It's definitely a bucket list thing, I think, for football fans. When you got a lot of players from your favorite college team, it's fun to see these guys go out there in drills. And of course, this year you added a Mardi Gras parade, and, you're really building some nice events around that. Mobile, a really cool, hospitable city, the original Mardi Gras city, and my birthplace as well. So I enjoyed that event. I like coming down there. It's a good excuse for me to be down there on the bay. But the reason I bring that up is I remember the first time I met you and we talked, and of course you've been a scout for so long, and you were a scout in the Southeast, I think, in your last stop. And I asked you about the job that Kirby Smart was doing. And you told me that the guys that were coming out then were good, but you felt it would take a few years for Kirby to really put his fingerprint and build his culture. And here we are 4 years later. And I guess I would ask you, is it still a building process, or what would you say about the way Kirby is has built the program and the way he's developing players now?
It's been built, Mike. I mean, it's obviously been built. No, seeing what they've done, it's been fun to watch from the outside looking in. I know, it was a great program. It's always been a great program. Coach Rick did a great job. I think, when Coach Rick got let go, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're like 10-3 that year. So it's not like they weren't winning football games, but in order to get it to where I'm sure Coach Smart wanted it, kind of in his image, where he was coming from in Tuscaloosa, and have his own spin on it too. I mean, I'm sure he hasn't done a carbon copy job, but I'm sure there's some carryover into what they've done at Alabama. It takes time. And obviously this year you saw it play out. I mean, it was a historically good front seven. I said that back in September on social media. I said, this Georgia defense is going to be the defense that, your kids are going to be telling their grandkids about someday. And I'm glad they didn't make me look stupid by saying that, but it's built. You look what they've done in recruiting, really, really impressive. The infrastructure, all the facilities upgrades. They've just done an unbelievable job. You can't say enough about the job that Coach Smart and his staff have done.
We're talking to Jim Nagy. He is the Senior Bowl Executive Director, former longtime NFL. What is it, Jim? I got to ask you to brag. Is it 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings? How many you got?
4, and lost a couple others. I lost in heartbreakers, Mike. So one of them when I was with the Pats, we lost on the David Tyree catch against the Giants, and then years later, back in the same building in Arizona, I was with the Seahawks, and when we lost to the Patriots on the Malcolm Butler interception. So I was just really fortunate to be a part of some good teams with some great coaches and great quarterbacks, and learned a lot. You can learn a lot working for a couple different franchises that get there. I was lucky enough to be with 3. So to me, it was very educational how to build a football team.
No doubt. And what to look for in players. And let's start with the Georgia players that went to the Senior Bowl. I believe there were 8 or 9 with invites, and I think 5 or 6 ended up playing. And the guy to me that really appeared to steal the show. And what's cool, I don't know, I wish people had more familiarity. I think more people are starting to watch the Senior Bowl. I think there's more coverage of it and better coverage of it now. But you get to interview these guys off the field. You get to watch them in the one-on-one drills. And the guy that to me really exploded on the scene, and you recognized him early on, was Devonte Wyatt. And I'll let you share what went down for Devonte, because it was after the Senior Bowl that people really started talking about Devonte Wyatt as a first-round draft pick. We hadn't heard those projections before, second round, third round. He was the other guy, but leaving the Senior Bowl, man, his stock just shot up, Jim.
Yeah, it did. And I had that conversation with Devonte when he got to Mobile, that this was his week. This was his, all those front 7 guys, they're all kind of lumped in together as a unit. And that's great, man. It's really cool being part of a unit like that. And Georgia fans will always remember that group, but it was time for him. That's what the pre-draft process is all about, is to really make a name for yourself. So I told him that, and, believed in his talent. He made a huge jump this year too, Mike. Like a year ago, he was Senior Bowl eligible last year, and he was below the line. We did not invite him. So to get to the point now where he's being talked about as a first rounder, that tells you the work that he put in. We always knew he was explosive, but just more disruptive this year. It showed up on the field more consistently, worked on his flexibility, especially in his lower half. Like that was different this year. Just a really, really disruptive player. Anytime you have someone with those kind of traits, in a one-on-one situation, just lining up across from another man and having to beat him. I knew he'd be able to showcase what he can be as a pass rusher. And as we all know, I mean, that's what it's all about at the next level, is getting after the QB. So now that teams know like how he can, affect the quarterback, and teams' minds are kind of like that he's going to be a 3-down player for him, 3-down starter for him eventually. That's why he's being talked about in the first round. You got to take those guys up high. You got to take, if they get 3-down starter value, they don't last very long on the interior.
Yeah, Devonte, real sudden at the line of scrimmage, very explosive player. And I know his technique was talked a lot about down there. And again, what we're talking about here at the Senior Bowl, when you watch the team play, like Jim said, that's great front seven collectively. But at the Senior Bowl, that hat next to you isn't a G. And that guy across from you, it doesn't matter where, it's really one-on-one breakdown. And I've seen guys get embarrassed there. I won't mention any names, but way back in the day, Tennessee had a national championship team and brought some linemen down there, and we all found out that center wasn't real good. He needed help from that guard, right? Well, down in the Senior Bowl, you see these guys go one-on-one. Chances are Nagy probably wouldn't have even invited the guy. But, sometimes you wonder, maybe you got to take a guy to get the other 6. I don't think that's the case anymore. People understand now that the only real all-star, I shouldn't say the only real one, but the Senior Bowl, it really is a who's who. It's almost a convention, an unofficial NFL convention, because everybody is there. It is crazy networking for the NFL. And if you're a reporter, you're in the minority. Usually the media outnumbers the coaches. Down there, the coaches and the NFL personnel outnumber the media 4 or 5 to 1. Want to talk about the Georgia linebackers. I know Quay Walker didn't play, Jim, but he was a guy that you scouted. And then Channing Tindell, who I think is a sneaky pick because of what he did at the combine with that 4.47. Quay ran like a 4.51 at 240. I think Tindell jumped like 41 or 40. These numbers were just explosive. Could you talk a little bit about Channing and Quay and where you think they fit in for the NFL and in the draft?
Yeah. So start with Channing, just the speed jumps off. And I want to say that I put something out on Twitter earlier in the year, and it might've said like 4.47, 4.48. That's certainly what he plays like. Posted a couple clips of this year, just him getting, from in the box across the field and making plays outside the numbers that just you don't see. You don't see closing speed like that very often. It jumps off the tape. So for a guy that hadn't been a full-time starter till this year and was kind of a rotational player a lot, I just talking to Glenn Schumann through the year. He's a guy that he was just really wish he could get on the field more. It's obviously a problem a lot of coaches wish they had, that they have that kind of depth. But Channing's what the league's looking for in terms of run and hit linebackers. We had Bobby Wagner in Seattle, and I scouted Bobby when I was with the Chiefs. I wasn't with Seattle yet, coming out of Utah State. And, Bobby wasn't the fastest processor in college. I actually had some reservations about his instincts coming out, but he ran 4.48 coming in. So he just made up with his speed, made up for any delays he might have with that speed. Channing can do the same thing. And you saw the processing get better and better and better over the season. And really did a nice job during Senior Bowl week. So big explosive guy, ton of upside, still relatively inexperienced from a football standpoint, just hasn't played a ton of reps. But even going back to last year at this time when we were starting to watch this year's Georgia team last spring, the speed stood out on special teams and the willingness to collision and strike. Just an innately physical guy, downhill guy. And usually when you describe linebackers as downhill players, they're more old school kind of thumper, between the tackles players. That is, anyone that watches Georgia knows that's not Channing. So he can get to anywhere he wants to on the football field with the speed. So we're glad to have him. He's a great young man. Really had a good week down here. And then Quay, was a guy that was, one of our scouting assistants' favorite players in the whole, that he did last year. So he was really bummed when, we got together with Quay's agent. And Quay had accepted his invite. We're pumped for him to come. And then we found out in the semifinal game against Michigan, he got hurt. I want to say it was a rib injury. And then he played in the national championship with it. They put I think they got a Kevlar vest that he played with, from what the staff said. And then he was trying to push it the week before to come back and play in the Senior Bowl. And while he was training, he overcompensated and did something to his back. So he was just all out of whack. And I trust his agent. His agent's one of the best guys in the business. His agent played in the Senior Bowl. So he's a big believer in what our game can do and help players. So it was a legit thing, and it was unfortunate. I think Quay would have had an awesome week. He's one of those guys, like, you watch the tape and you don't appreciate how big of a human being Quay is. And for a guy that size, the feet that he has, I mean, he really, his ability to change direction and keep his feet under him. I mean, it's super impressive when you watch him play live. So I really felt like he would have helped himself tremendously by going through Senior Bowl week, but he was hurt. We get that. Happy that he's been testing well, and hope he has a great NFL career.
Yeah, I thought he was the guy that made a big jump, Jim. I really liked how quick he was, and what do they call it? Gap integrity. You don't see Kirby Smart defenses lack gap integrity often. That's why you don't see those explosive plays. And I felt like Quay, last in the 2020 season, kind of felt like he was a half a step late. Maybe the gap wasn't quite. This year, I thought he was incredibly solid, open field, automatic tackler. And as you said, he is a physical dude, man. When he hears you, it's not a crack, it's a thump. Right? I mean, because he brings it and you can just hear that, almost like you can feel that guy's spine reverberating or that brain hitting inside the helmet when Quay Walker hits you. He hits like a ton, and I agree with you. I think he would have been a hell of a player at the Senior Bowl, but I think there's plenty of tape. And again, I think Quay and Channing both, sometimes, and I guess I'll take a sidebar here, Jim. A lot of times when we listen to other NFL draft analysts, and I know that you only speak for yourself, but I kind of get the feeling that sometimes I'm getting secondhand information, or, somebody's been doing it a long time and they have good sources. And again, what I love about talking with you is you're the scout. These are your eyes. These are your words. This is not secondhand. This is somebody who's been in the trenches and done it. Your career and your livelihood depended on you being accurate on these dudes, because if you're giving the bad info, Belichick or Holmgren's telling you, hit the road, Nagy. Instead, you're collecting Super Bowl rings. So I think your opinions really matter. So this is what I want to ask you. Is there times where scouts, teams, coaches will maybe say things or not talk about people because they don't want people to know they're really high on a Channing Tindell, or they don't want them? There's an old story about Denny Green sandbagging Randy Moss so that he would sink. I mean, how often do you think that game happens?
Yeah, it certainly happens. It happens with our selection process. I mean, there's guys that, we'll start posting stuff on next year's class. We'll get through this year's draft and I'll post, plenty of guys. I just posted some stuff tonight about a corner at Washington State, and we, like to really profile our guys that play in the game. But when we turn the page on this year's draft and get into May and June and July, I'll be posting stuff every single day, all summer long, about usually a prospect or two every day that we're watching. And it's funny to see how many guys like hit me up over the summer and text me like, man, I can't believe you posted something about that guy. Like he was my sleeper. Like I did it a couple summers ago. There was a running back at Michigan, Chris Evans, who was coming off he was academically suspended for a year. Even his senior year, he only had like 17 carries. I took a bunch of flack for inviting him to the Senior Bowl that year. But I posted something that summer before, and there was like literally like 5 or 6 different guys texted me, and they're like, man, I can't believe you just posted something on Chris Evans. So yeah, there's definitely some of that there. But that's natural, right? Like again, nowadays it's hard to say anyone's a sleeper. I mean, everyone's got access to tape, and the whole draft process is blown up and everyone's interested in it. So it's really hard to get all the way through the process where there's like a true sleeper that people don't know about. But I know there's certainly some guys, from our perspective of our game. I know there's players that we invite that a lot of teams wish we wouldn't invite, because then we just put them on the big stage. But yeah, it certainly happens, Mike.
Last year, one of the guys you invited, and I wish he could have gone more than one day, was Big Ben Cleveland. But I think he won what was once called the beauty pageant when he got on the scales at about 350. I forget how big his hands were, but talk about massive people. And lo and behold, Ben Cleveland was a 3rd-round draft pick. You had a couple more dogs this year on the offensive line. Jamari Salyer, a pretty versatile guy that could play all 5 spots. He lined up at left tackle this year. A lot of people think more of a guard. And then Justin Schaefer, a guy that you told me, hey, Mike, this is a guy that people actually had graded higher than Solomon Kinley, who I think is still hanging on with the Dolphins, a guy I really like. And I still think Solomon Kinley's best football is ahead of him, and especially with all these pickups the Dolphins have made recently. But of Jamari Salyer and Justin Schaefer, tell me about these 2 Georgia linemen and your thoughts on them moving forward in the draft and in the NFL.
Yeah, one of my favorite Georgia linemen that One of my favorite linemen, period, that I've done over the last, 10 years. I loved Isaiah Wynn when he was coming out of Georgia. He's one of my favorite guys that year. I was still in the league. I was still working for Seattle. Man, I thought he was great. Now, Jamari's different player, but I'm just thinking Georgia left tackles. Yeah, I think he could get you out of a game at left tackle because he's played out there and he's got good patience and he's got good feel and he's played it a bunch. He's seen a lot out there. So I think he could get you through a game. I do think his best fit's going to be inside. He played some center during Senior Bowl week. He's obviously done that for Georgia. So he's probably the Swiss Army knife of this year's offensive line class. So, any team that values versatility up front, which is about everybody nowadays, you can't be a one position player unless you're going to be a starter. If you're a guard only, you better start. If you're a center only, you better start. So Jamari's a really cool player with his versatility. He's a strong guy. He's a big body, super smart. It was good spending time around him. I think, we have former NFL players come down in our group. They're guys that participate in our scout school program over the summer. We bring them back for the week. And, so a couple of the guys that were with the O linemen this year were a couple of former offensive line guys that played in the Senior Bowl and played in the NFL. And Jamari was one of their favorites in terms of just like spending time with him and talking football with him, just how passionate he is. And then, Schaefer, to me, yeah, I think he's a guy that Solomon Kinley, and I've talked to some teams that had higher grades coming out than they had on Ben Cleveland. Now they're two different. I mean, two completely different body types. So sometimes it's hard to make that to differentiate just because they're so different in terms of what their physical traits are. But yeah, Justin, he's a good player. He can play low. He can root people out. He's powerful in the run game. And again, another guy that's played a lot of football. And the good thing is, looks like he's done a really good job with his body since our game and through the combine. Like he's going in the right direction body wise and taking really good care of himself. So, those guys were really key for Georgia this year. They're good players. The defense got all the attention, but I really feel like, those are two big holes that Georgia's going to have to fill next year. I mean, they're losing a lot of experience. They're losing a lot of toughness. They're losing a lot of maturity. Two good players. Both those guys are going to play in the league for a long time, I think.
It's really cool that we're still talking about Bulldogs at the Senior Bowl, because a couple Senior Bowls, not as many guys. Part of that is Georgia's had a lot of guys leave early. These juniors leave early, and if they've graduated college, they can still play in the Senior Bowl. But if they haven't finished their education, Kirby talks about that, the accelerated calendar now. Kids come in now in January. They don't even graduate high school, and they're leaving, and they've had that extra spring that really helps them. Of course, physically, they develop faster than others. Two more guys, Jim, that were on the Senior Bowl radar. Darion Kendrick is a guy that played there. Of course, his story, a kid that, had some off-the-field issues at Clemson. Got them taken care of and showed up and showed out for the Bulldogs this year. Very important component in a Georgia secondary that was going through a major reload after losing 4 DBs to the NFL the previous year. And then a guy you scouted that, didn't make it down there. And James Cook said, his agent said one thing. I found out that, his agent said, but then when I talked to Cook, he said, well, I just think I had enough film. And I'm thinking, man, if only he realizes what type of audience he would have had. And a lot of fans watching, a lot of Georgia fans will say, he did plenty. Why do they need to go to the Senior Bowl? Well, because it's a different environment. It's an NFL offense. It's NFL coaches that you're auditioning for firsthand, Jim. And a guy like James Cook, to me, seems like that would have really been an opportunity maybe for him to launch into the maybe late first or mid-second round.
I'll start with Darion. Good football player, man. It's unfortunate he's not run well at the combine or the pro day, and that's good. That's critical at that corner position. I think there's
hamstring.
Is there? Oh, it was the hamstring's been holding back.
Yep.
Oh, that's good. That's really positive. But because on tape, I mean, he ran in the 4.7s, and had I seen a 4.7 guy on tape, he wouldn't have gotten the Senior Bowl invite, right? So that really surprised me when he was running those kinds of times. I'm glad to hear that's injury related, because on tape, I mean, he's got really good feet. I mean, just start there. He's got really good feet, really good transition skills in off-man coverage. He can play the ball, competitive guy. So no, a good football player, a guy that a lot of teams had day 2 grades on throughout the fall. I mean, really was a slam dunk. I mean, he never was even around the cut line for us. So he we targeted pretty much since last spring. And, part of that too, we wanted to, our game is, these rosters are for the NFL. We want to bring players they want to see. And that's why, kind of the last phase of our process, we obviously do all our own work and we scout the players. And we had 120 years of NFL experience on our staff this year between the 7 scouts we had. But these rosters aren't for us. They're for the NFL. So we want to bring the players they want to see. And so the last part of the process is really vetting out our projected roster to the teams, and, 2 guys that I spent a lot of time in the league with and getting their feedback, and they're open. They know I'm not going to share things with other teams or the media. So some of the teams, they'll tell us exactly what grades they have on players. So Darion was a guy that was carrying a lot of day 2 grades. Now I'll be interested to see how this hamstring and in the 40 time and all that affects where he goes. But one part of the reason we brought him down is you talked about some of the off-field stuff and the Clemson transfer. They wanted to spend time with Darion. They wanted to hear his story. They want to spend more time around him. So that was part of it too. With James Cook, I felt like he could have benefited as much or more than any player we invited to the game this year. So not buying that argument that, he had all that tape. I mean, he really didn't. He was never the bell cow there. He was never the lead back. This week would have been huge for him. He had a long stop and go touchdown against Alabama as a junior out on the perimeter where they threw it to him. I was at that game. Did it again against Michigan in the semifinal. Like, the plan was to play him at wide receiver a bunch during Senior Bowl week, and really would have helped him. It's one thing to run routes on air at a pro day. It's another to show you can separate from an actual defender and catch the football in contested situations. And he would have had a chance to do that. So, didn't agree with it, but it's his decision. That's more than his right. I thought it was an opportunity for him to showcase himself, because he is very talented. James is a really talented athlete, has a lot of upside, but to show like what he could do as a pass protector and, as a detached route runner, I just felt like there was a lot of opportunity there. And again, what a lot of people don't realize is these GMs and head coaches, these decision makers, they're just human, right? And like, we all kind of gravitate and are around things that we are familiar with. And I was doing a radio show in Pittsburgh earlier today, and they linked that like their last 10 first-round picks were all guys that Mike Tomlin or Kevin Colbert, the GM, had seen at pro days. And to me, that's just familiarity. These guys are human. Like, they want to draft players they're familiar with. They go to these pro days. They spend time with them. They see them down on the practice field. They watch them compete. And the Senior Bowl is the same way. If you're a GM, you don't get out a lot in the fall. If you're a head coach, you don't get out at all in the fall. So like, you don't have any face-to-face, live exposures to any of these players. So, to come to the Senior Bowl and get in front of these guys who are down at field level, that has an impact. There's a carryover there with guys that come to the Senior Bowl and get viewed, seen by these decision makers up close, as opposed to, some of the underclassmen, the juniors that can't. It's just, to me, it's impactful. I think people forget that these guys are just like everyone. We just want to, you want to be around people you're familiar with, and they feel like it's a more educated draft pick. So I feel like it was a lost opportunity for James, but I wish him well. He's a really good player.
Yeah, kind of like buying a car online. Some people can do it, but most people want to take it out for a test drive and give it, kick the tires, walk around. And some evidence of that last year, Jim. A lot of people, Trey McKitty's a guy that had 4 or 5 catches at Georgia. And you told me when he came in from Florida State, you said, Mike, this guy is an NFL player. This guy's going to be. And I said, okay, let's wait and see. I think he had some injuries, slowed him down, had 4 or 5 catches. Nobody's talking about Trey McKitty. Goes to the Senior Bowl, blows up. I think he went in the 3rd round. Another guy, Mark Webb, didn't have a spectacular year. I was surprised he went pro. Thought he should have come back for another year. Goes to the Senior Bowl, kills it, wins MVP of his position, gets drafted. So the proof is in the pudding. I've seen it happen. I think these Georgia players, because there are so many other great players around them, I think it's hard for them to separate. I think that can work against you a little. But when you put them one-on-one, you look at them closely, and sometimes because of Georgia's system, you mentioned Devonte Wyatt getting after the passer, turning him loose a little bit. Sometimes these guys don't do everything they can do in the Georgia scheme. You see a lot of substitutions, a lot of guys play. Could he be a 3-down player? Sure, but Georgia's got the luxury. Maybe there's a kid they want to get more snaps to, so they pull a kid out on the 2nd down. That's a good transition into Jordan Davis. I know he was a guy on the radar, and I know that he was a guy that would have loved to have gone to Senior Bowl. Now, that's a guy, though, Jim. I mean, he really did get his speed down. He ran a 4.79 legit 40, and maybe maybe that was a good benefit for Jordan. What are your thoughts about him and his ceiling moving forward?
Excuse me. Yeah, Jordan's super talented guy. He's got everything in his body that he needs to be a very good NFL player. He was the favorite. He was at the top of the board, near the top of the board since last spring. I think I might have shared this story with you, Mike, but we had our scout school last summer, and we were, I picked some top guys, first 3-round guys that we were looking at different positions. And, the group, this group of former NFL guys was sitting there, and they were evaluating, we're taking notes. And then I put Jordan Davis on, and like the whole room, kind of everyone sat up in their chairs. Like he's got kind of that wow factor that you want when you're drafting up high in the draft. I mean, this is where I talked to Jordan's representation about it. I met Jordan at SEC Media Days. I didn't get a chance to talk to him after the season. I was dealing more so through his agents. But, my thing there is, like you just said, like he didn't get a chance to show people how he could really rush the passer at Georgia. And that's no knock on the staff. I mean, that staff's unbelievable. They do a great job, and they got to get a lot of bodies on the field. And they've got some really athletic wave guys that they can bring in and get after the QB. So, no knock there. I just thought with Jordan's explosion, if he could just do kind of like what Perrion Winfrey did from Oklahoma in the Senior Bowl, and just get into guards and walk them back and show that he could consistently collapse a pocket. He goes from being a guy, because there are some teams in the league that feel like Jordan Davis is a 2-down player. Right. And I felt like coming to the Senior Bowl, like he would have dispelled all that. He would have put all that to rest. And again, with a 40-time Jordan was going to run fast. And when you're talking about a 340-pound man, yeah, it trust me, I timed him. I think I had him 4.78, 4.9. I was at the 40-yard dash at the combine. As crazy as it is, and I'll always remember timing a guy that big, that fast. At the end of the day, like if he ran 4.92 or 4.78, it's all the same thing. It's still ridiculous. Even like a 4.90, 4.92, anything sub 5 would have been incredible. No, a really good player. I was bummed out that he didn't come, but that was their decision. I respect that. He's a really good player. He'll go in the first round. I'll be curious to see how high he goes. But a guy with that kind of knockback and that kind of, flexibility and pad level, like even some of his reps at fullback and tight end were like, wow, like he's what you want when you draft in the top half of the first round. You want a guy that's got some wow factor to him, and Jordan certainly has that.
I want to ask you about a couple other guys, Jim. And again, we're talking with Jim Nagy. He's the Senior Bowl executive director, and I really appreciate the time Jim's given us. Typically, when he does interviews with reporters about a team, it's 3 or 4 guys. It's 15 minutes, and he's out the door. I feel like we're talking about half the roster here. And these guys couldn't play in your game, but they were projected first-round picks. You do a lot of NFL draft commentary. And, in fact, are you going to be doing some this year? Are you already signed on to do any draft work yet, Jim?
Yeah, some, not as extensively in the past. It's actually been kind of nice. I've got a lot to focus on here at the game. We've added staff and we got a lot going on. So I will be doing stuff between now and the draft, but really trying to take a step back in that area a little bit.
Okay. Well, yeah, he got plenty of publicity last year. We saw him, seemed like every network, but 2 guys I want to ask you. So 2 guys and 2 questions. So Nakobe Dean, we hear a lot about Nakobe. We saw what he did on the field. He was the heart and soul, the brain of the defense. But there's some questions about his height. You're a former NFL scout, 5'10", 5'11". How big of a difference between 6'1", 6'2" for that interior linebacker? And then the other guy, the workout wonder. We see so much about the Michigan DNs. Really bad news about Ajabo and the Achilles heel, by the way. But Trayvon Walker, a 275 guy that runs the 4.5 40 and jumps and leaps, and he's the workout wonder at the combine and everybody's cup of tea. So the question is about Nakobe Dean's height. How much of a difference will that really make? And then 2, Trayvon Walker, how much can a super combine performance like that for a guy like Trayvon make a difference in his draft stock?
Yeah, I think both these guys, what's going on in the league right now, I don't think either thing will really impact either of them that much. I think when it comes to Nakobe, I think just by comparison, when you go and you watch Georgia play live and you've got just, a specimen like Quay Walker on one side of him, and then Channing Tindall, who's a really good looking guy himself. And, just the speed jumps out at you. Nakobe, doesn't have what those guys have traits wise. He just doesn't. Now it's good. I mean, those guys are exceptional in a couple areas, but he's a really good football player, and he moves well in space. He changes direction. He breaks down. He's got great eyes. He's around the football all the time. He's a solid tackler. He's instinctive in coverage. He's a good short zone player. So, no, I think if you're just, at the end of the day, you want to get good football players. I mean, teams that nail the draft are guys that, just focus on guys that can play ball, and he's that guy. So I know what he means to that room. Coach Schumann's, talked at length about Nakobe, even though he wasn't a Senior Bowl guy for us. I mean, Glenn just, loves the kid and what he brought to the room. So I'm sure he's crushed the interview part of this pre-draft process. And so I don't think it'll affect him that much. It's become more of a space game. It's become less of a downhill game. It used to be, when I got into scouting 25 years ago, there was a lot of people that just preached it was a big man's game. It's a big man's game. And it's become less and less that over the years. So I think Nakobe will be fine. With Trayvon, it's all about the traits, and we're seeing it every position, including quarterback, which is crazy. I mean, it's just, you used to want quarterbacks that really knew how to play. And now it's like people are just looking for traits. Just like with Josh Allen and Buffalo's ability to develop Josh pretty quickly. I think everyone focused on traits across the board, and Trayvon obviously has borderline rare traits. And so some team's going to feel like they can hit on him. I mean, I feel like, Twitter wasn't really a thing back in whatever year that was, 2009. I mean, maybe that's right when Twitter got started, maybe. But like when Ziggy Ansah came out of BYU, I was scouting for the Chiefs at the time. I was our national scout, so I only looked at players that were graded a certain level or higher by our area scouts. And I went to Utah in September and finished up that day. And I called our office. I'm like, "Are you sure I don't have to go to BYU?" And they're like, "No, there's no one graded high enough. You're good to move on." And then, I started to hear some buzz in October that there was this really athletic, walk-on player and from Nigeria, and he was running down on kickoff, and now he's playing a little on defense. And then in November, you started to hear a little more buzz. So I'm like, "Oh man, I can't believe I wasn't scheduled." I mean, when you're trying to get all over the country, I was never going to get back to Salt Lake. So I never saw Ziggy Ansah. And Ziggy Ansah went to the Senior Bowl that year, had a dominant week, and ended up as the 5th pick in the NFL draft.
Wow.
And in September, as a national scout, I didn't even go into the school to look at him. So if you talk about like hitting on traits, I think Twitter would blow up right now if a guy that played basically 1 year of college football at BYU became the 5th pick in the NFL draft. And Ziggy, before injuries started to take their toll, Ziggy was a really good NFL player. So I think that's why teams are going to, feel like they can hit on Trayvon. And again, I've heard people pick apart his production. The guy was productive. Like you look at, he had like 6 or 6.5 sacks. Like that's good production in the SEC, especially on a defense that had a bunch of other guys eating too. So, I mean, you had a lot of guys flying around getting production. So, it's not like he was going to be able to hog any sacks or anything. So, no, I again, long-windedly, Mike, I don't think either of those guys are really going to be hurt by kind of what some people are trying to overthink on social media right now.
Well, Jim, I've been greedy with your time. I'm going to stop there. There's a few more players I'll email you about because I've kept you way too long. But I got to tell you, for the people that wonder why I get excited about going to the Senior Bowl, why I get excited about interviewing you, anybody that's just listened to you, over this last half an hour, I mean, what a clinic. I mean, this and straight from the horse's mouth, right? I mean, a guy who scouted for Super Bowl team that's been a national director, regional, and tonight a guest. And Jim, I've really appreciated the education you've given me over the last 4 years as a reporter. I'm down there. I'm all ears, man, because I think you do a fantastic job. That game has has taken off. It's an incredible event. I hate I wasn't able to make the Mardi Gras parade on Friday night with the players throwing out beads. I bet that was an awesome deal. Maybe next year there'll be enough dogs down there. I'm sure you're already making your list, and people need to follow you on Twitter as well. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know the Georgia fans appreciate it, and I'll shoot you an email so when I do the preview for the draft, I'll have Jim Nagy on each guy, but I'm going to cut him off tonight. Jim, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Mike, always love talking, man. Just hit me up anytime, and let's hook up as we get maybe after the draft, after all these guys get drafted.
That'd be awesome. Jim Nagy, Senior Bowl Executive Director, just an outstanding first half to the show. Thrilled to have Jim on. Going to take a break now. When I come back, we're going to talk about all this quarterback stuff going on at Georgia. Kirby throwing Stetson Bennett out, kind of under the bus last week. Then you hear Carson Beck's getting first-team reps, maybe Brock Vandagriff. Is Kirby sending a message? Could there really be a quarterback situation? I don't think there's any controversy. But right now, let's take a break. For Ingles, no controversy here. A brand we all know, trust, love, and certainly appreciate their support on our Monday night Ingles on the Beat show.
It's in our hearts to feel for you. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. We stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand. Community strong.
Well, welcome back to the program. Mike Griffith here. And I haven't been looking at comments the first half of the show. I just got to tell you, I mean, and Nagy's the best, man. He really is. You know, I compliment my guests. I'm authentic. I mean it. Jim Nagy knows football. You heard it. I mean, he is legit. And really excited that we were able to get him on tonight. He spent a lot of time with us. I mean, he really did. And it's valuable time because you can tell he's already working on next year's Senior Bowl class. And I'm going to look at the phone here to read your comments and questions. First, let me do a little reporting for you. So I had heard a buzz. Well, let me go all the way back to last Tuesday after practice. I don't even think Kirby really was asked about Stetson Bennett, and he just kind of initiated that Georgia has a lot of high expectations for everyone. I think Kirby's made it very clear that he has turned the page on the national championship. Now, fans continue to celebrate. You know, put your bumper stickers on. I love the Georgia gear. I love the national championship logo. It looks really cool. I'm waiting to see it on a license plate. I'm sure that program's going on today. You may have seen, I'm sure there'll be some mention of it at the G-Day game. I know the visitors that come in, when I saw Eli Manning wearing a visitor credential, it said champs on it. G-Day game tickets on sale right now, by the way, $5 just started today. But Kirby's turned the page, all right? He's all about next year. And the standard is not going down. You heard what Jim said about massive holes to fill for leadership and great players. And Kirby needs it filled now. And that means the players that are coming back need to expand their roles. And Stetson's one of those guys, okay? He wants Stetson to be a team leader. And if we're going to be frank about it, there were 18 guys voted team captains last year. Stetson Bennett wasn't one of them, okay? He needs to be, if he is going to be the quarterback, he needs to be a team leader. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean running on the field and getting the most cheers because you're the quarterback. It means influencing others in a positive way, but it also means setting an example. And so Kirby said that they continue to challenge Stetson to go to class, to do the right things, to perform better on the field. And I'm thinking to myself, Stetson's a 24-year-old sixth-year senior. Why is Kirby talking about anything related to going to class or anything related? I mean, that was a red flag. Now, a lot of the other media guys, and again, everybody does it their way. You know, Stetson was a Jeopardy question. Stetson told a really funny story about being asked about a three-striped armadillo. But to me, when I hear Kirby doesn't make mistakes. It wasn't like this was overheard in the hallway. It wasn't like he said it and said, oops, I didn't mean it, okay? He went out of his way to say these things about Stetson Bennett, to publicly challenge Stetson Bennett. He was making a point. There's no doubt that's what Kirby does. He did it with LeCount. You know, he did it with Devonte Wyatt a couple years. When Kirby, I mean, that coaches use the media and public perception to motivate players. And he's clearly trying to get Stetson Bennett's attention. Something's not going right there. That's a concern, okay? It's a concern because that's your returning quarterback. That's the MVP of the Orange Bowl and the CFP championship game, right? So then came the news that came out that on Thursday and Saturday, other guys are playing first team. Beck is getting reps. Vandergrift's getting reps. Now you could say, well, Mike, these are just guys that were going to get opportunities because that's what spring is all about. Well, yeah, but we also heard that spring was about Stetson Bennett was going to get more first team reps than ever for the first time. He was going to be the first teamer and benefit from all these reps. Now that could still happen. We're only talking about 2 practices, Thursday and Saturday, but was Kirby rotating those guys in, or was Kirby sending a message to Stetson Bennett? And maybe both. I think probably both. Now, I fully expect, and I could be wrong, I think Stetson Bennett's the guy. I think he's going to start. I think Kirby's going to stick with him. He's got all the experience. He knows how to run the team at the line of scrimmage. And I just don't know if Beck or Vandegrift is going to get enough repetitions, enough experience that they're going to feel comfortable elevating those guys over Stetson Bennett. Now, it does make sense suddenly why Georgia was recruiting Caleb Williams in the portal. Now that makes sense, okay? And could there be another quarterback transfer? I threw this out there. JT Daniels hasn't signed anywhere yet. Is there a fringe chance he could end up sticking around? Probably not. I think in the end, Stetson Bennett gets the message. He's a fighter. He's a grinder. And I think he's still going to be the Georgia quarterback. I believe that. I think he will respond to the challenges that Kirby Smart is putting in front of him. Because I think Stetson Bennett has probably figured out Kirby's not playing here, man. When the Kirby train leaves the station, if you're not on board, you get left, all right? And Stet needs to get on board. And I think Kirby Smart has made that abundantly clear with his actions and with his words. So this is something to keep an eye on. Doesn't mean they're going to lose extra. I'll be honest with you. I'll say this too. I don't think it matters who's quarterback next year to this extent. I think Georgia is going to win all but one regular season game, whether it's Stetson, Brock, or Carson. I really do, because this offense has so many great skill position players. I think the run game is going to be dominant. And Todd Monken has shown me that he can design an offense around the talent that he has. This Georgia offense was vastly different when JT Daniels was out there with 4 and 5 receiver, pro-style spread, air raid concepts than it was with Stead out there, primarily a play-action bootleg guy with a good deep ball, okay? Different offenses, different skill sets. The magic happens at the line of scrimmage. Monken is brilliant. The discipline of the spacing, the ability to manipulate the matchups, the opportunity for the quarterback to call the right run play at the line of scrimmage so that your offensive linemen have leverage on every play. That's the brilliance of Todd Monken, regardless of who's at quarterback, to me. So that's my thought on that. If I was a Georgia fan, I wouldn't be panicking. I'd be getting my popcorn. I'd go, okay, hey, I don't know who it's going to be. This is going to be interesting. I wouldn't be losing sleep over it. Kirby's going to sort it out, okay? Kirby's going to figure this out because that's what Kirby Smart does. And I think there's 100 million reasons why that's going to happen. Pretty excited to hear about Zion Logue and Jamon Dumas-Johnson. To me, these are 2 new household names. Look, you already know about Jalen Carter. You know about Keely Ringo, Chris Smith, Nolan Smith. These are names you've heard. But Zion Logue, a guy that's coming on the scene. And Jamon Dumas-Johnson, Pops. Kirby, somebody asked him about it. He said, no, that's just Pops. So he's Pops. Pops is going to come in and blow some people up, much like Quay Walker, a guy you heard me say to Jim that you could hear the thud. I mean, the bodies colliding. I mean, man, that's some physical stuff when it's a thud, man. When it's a crack, it's a glancing blow. When it's a thud, it's like blunt impact. And Pops brings it to that extent. So those are some of my thoughts. I wanted to share that with you. I want to take your questions now. I'm going to look here on my phone and see if you guys have any questions. I'm glad, Rodney White, I'm glad you enjoyed Jim Nagy. Sonia Prescott is joking with me tonight. Sonia, I see you out there. You got me last week, but not this week, Sonia. What do we got here? Guys, if you've got any questions now, I'm checking the thread. David Gillum, what's the ceiling for Bowers? Listen, you heard Jim Nagy, the guy with four Super Bowl rings, tell you, haven't seen a tight end like this in a long time. Listen, usually Jim doesn't even talk to me about sophomores or juniors, right? He's got a one-track mind, okay? Most successful people do. He's extremely focused on this next Senior Bowl class, but even he has noticed Brock Bowers. You can't help but notice Brock Bowers. While he's watching film of Salyer, of Schaefer, of James Cook, of Zamir White. Zamir didn't want to play in the game either. While he's watching that film, you see Bowers jump out at you. And he felt the need to mention him. That tells you everything you need to know. Brock Bowers' ceiling, if he stays healthy, I mean, is he already the greatest Georgia tight end ever? I think he is. He broke all the records as a freshman on a national championship team. Listen, I'll be honest with you. You take Brock Bowers out of the offense, Georgia doesn't win a national title. I'm going to tell you, if you look for the MVP, the one guy, the most influential guy on the season, any position, is Brock Bowers. Because if you take out Stet, you can still play JT, right? You take out Jordan Davis, you still got Wyatt and Carter. But you take away Brock Bowers, and think about how many circus catches this guy made. Balls thrown over his head, behind him, it runs after the catch. Without a doubt, the MVP of the national championship team was Brock Bowers. There's no doubt in my mind. So what do I think? I think he's a college football Hall of Famer. Now, how does that translate? I hope he stays healthy. I pray he stays healthy. He's already having surgery this offseason. He's missing spring. If this kid can stay healthy, he is George Kittle. I was told last spring when I went out to California, when JT met with all those receivers out in California, and I was floating around out there, trying to, kind of figure out what was going on. Everybody was telling me the same thing. They were telling me, Mike, Brock Bowers is George Kittle. That's who he is. He's George Kittle. He is. You saw it. The catches, the runs. It just defies. He's a throwback. I mean, he's got an NIL deal with Everett Sports Management. I told Dan Everett, the guy that runs, I said, you need to get him a high top cleat deal with somebody. I mean, you need to put him in some old Jim Thorpe style shoes because this guy looks like a throwback. My campaign would be Brock Bowers in a leather helmet with high top, and I would have him run. I'd make him play in those high top leather black cleat because this dude's a throwback. I never saw Jim Thorpe play, but I imagine he would be like Brock Bowers. I mean, he's amazing, isn't he? He really is. So I can't say enough about Brock Bowers. You asked a question, you touched a nerve. This is a guy that gets me excited. I was really pleased. I run the freshman All-American team. I'm the chairman for that team, and I'm on the selection committee for Freshman of the Year. This is all part of the Steve Spurrier Award. You guys have seen it on our channel when we had the Spurrier Award. We had Brock Bowers on Dog Nation. Dog Nation had the very first Brock Bowers public appearance via the Freshman Awards. Sponsored by Chris Doring, probably the only and the nicest Gator that all the Georgia fans like. I think everybody would even admit they like Chris Doring and what he does personally sponsoring these awards out of his own pocket. I mean, how many guys do that? I mean, that's what kind of dude Chris Doring is. But having Brock Bowers on that night, how cool was that? So I was excited to make him to be a part of a committee that chose him as the national Freshman of the Year. And I can tell you, I'll be frank, the guys at Ohio State weren't real thrilled with that, okay? Their quarterback did some very special things, and there was definitely an argument to be made for the Ohio State quarterback. I just want to acknowledge that. But look, at the end of the day, they didn't win, okay? And that's what it came down to. Brock Bowers helped his team win a national championship and get in the college football playoffs, all right? And Ohio State didn't get it done. And if they would have, it would have been different. And it was a fantastic performance by the Ohio State quarterback, but it was what it was, man. To the victors go the spoils. We've seen it for years with the All-SEC teams and Bama stacking them up. Now Georgia is the team that stacked it up this year because the Dogs brought home the big trophy. So that's just how it goes. It's just how it goes. Let's take a look at some more of your question here, guys. Sonia Prescott, funny, the sky is falling. Questions. Sounds like Stead is opening the door for Brock or Beck. Well, Huey is. And we've talked about it. Kirby, and last year I thought Kirby gave Stead every break possible. I did. And I think he liked the underdog. I think he liked the consistency. But what I think it really came down to was the personnel. And when Georgia had healthy Blaylock, healthy Pickens, healthy Burton, I think JT was the dude, because you could run 4 and 5 wide because you were loaded with elite receivers, and that offense made sense. But when Pickens and Blaylock and at the start of the year Burton were down, and Kirby even said out loud at one point, it's really hard to run 4 and 5 wide receiver sets when you've only got 6 or 7 healthy guys. So by necessity, Georgia went to the 2 and 3, more of the 2 and 3 tight end looks. And all of a sudden now you're looking at more RPO action and more play action game. Instead was the runner. He was the better runner. And Kirby said that to ESPN. And when you're looking at a guy that passes first, more accurate, that's JT. When you're looking at the running quarterback, that's Stead. And Stead fit the offense that Kirby felt fit the personnel and fit the team and the model that he believed in to win the national championship. Now, you could argue maybe Kirby should have pulled Stead in the SEC title game, or maybe woulda, coulda, shoulda in the national title game. But I look at it like this. I say, look, folks, let that go. It doesn't matter anymore. Georgia won the championship. JT Daniels supported Stetson Bennett. He was a good teammate. They both have national championship rings. And 2021 is a year that no one can ever take away from Georgia football, okay? It was a great, special year. We commemorated it with a book. We're going to do a Dog Nation cruise. I can't believe you guys aren't asking me about it. April 25th through the 29th, sign up. Going out of Cape Canaveral on this Royal Caribbean ship. You need to get on. Brandon Adams and me are going to be in the same room for more than an hour. Can you just imagine what might happen? And you got Jeff Santella on there as well. You'll meet our boss, BJ Sweeney. If you got any suggestions or complaints, just go over. Hey, BJ, let me tell you what I really think of these guys. He's going to be there. I mean, this is going to be really cool, this Dog Nation cruise. I want to give that a pop. I've never been on a cruise. Never been on a cruise. Never. And I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because there's going to be Georgia fans there. And it's one of these life experiences. I'm like, you know what? It's a life experience. You got to do it. If I could jump out of airplanes 23 times when I was in the military, 18 to 21, I can handle a cruise for 4 days, right? How hard can it be? It's going to be fun. I keep telling myself, it's going to be fine. It's going to be great. Sign up for our Dog Nation cruise. Would you check that out? Let's see. What other questions did y'all got for me here tonight? Woo, what a show. Man, Jim Nagy gets me fired up. He's such a football purist, you get the dirt. And Jim just tells it like it is. Really enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. Not seeing a lot of other. Incoming freshmen will have the biggest impact. Ed Mattingly wants to know which incoming freshman will have the biggest impact next year. I think you mean this season. Man, that's a tough one because it's really hard typically for anybody to do anything on the line. Ernest Green, I think, is the only lineman. I've heard Ernest is getting plugged right in at left tackle. Another guy we've seen on Dog Nation, when I went out there to California to do all those stories on JT, Ernest Green actually played at the rival school. He was teammates with DJ Uiagalelei of Clemson. And I was at that other school and saw him out there. And he was the largest human being. I thought, this guy is the same size as Jordan Davis. He was close. And I went to the coach. I said, who is that? He goes, that's Ernest Green. I said, can I talk to him? I mean, he's like, oh yeah, George is recruiting him. And I brought Ernest Green in and we sat down in the weight room and I talked to him for 30 minutes. At the time he was an Ohio State lean. And I said, why do you want to go to Ohio State? You're going to play in the SEC, right? And then he talked a lot about his family in Georgia as well. Listen, how lucky am I? I'm sitting here talking to you guys, and the expert on Georgia recruiting is texting me, Centel. This is some free Centel intel. Usually you got to wait until Wednesday night to get the Centel intel. But tonight he's telling me, hey, it's Brett Thorson. It's the punter. That's the freshman, Mike. Thank you, Centel. Jeff is all over it, as you guys know. And man, what a great teammate. Again, I really encourage you guys, if you can make this cruise. Some of y'all have met Jeff in person at our Dog Nation, meet and greets and events, but he really is the ultimate teammate. So appreciate Jeff shooting me that message. I was kind of sitting here thinking to myself, man, who is the incoming freshman that's going to come in and start and be the most likely to start? It's Brett Thorson. So with Jake Camarda moving on, that's one of those big holes. And I didn't ask Jim about the punters, even though Jake was at the Senior Bowl. And the reason why, because Jim told me, look, Mike, I've got a certain scout that does that. It ain't me. But I can tell you that if he's here, he's one of the two best. And Camarda, to me, is probably the most underappreciated player on the national championship team. How many times did Jake Camarda flip the field? How many times was Georgia backed up in their 20, he punts it away, and the other team takes over at their 20 or 25 instead of the 50 or in Georgia territory? He was money in the bank. There were times earlier in Jake's career where he might have shanked it here or there at some ill-fated times, but not this year. Jake Camarda, to me, I think is going to be one of the most hard players to replace. I think one of the top 4 or 5. So good luck, Thorson. You got a heck of a player to replace. I'm going to be rooting for Jake Camarda. And how about him running like a 4.6 40? How about that? Just like I went to the charity camp with Kirby Smart and some guys a few years ago, and Camarda's dunking. I don't think people realized how special Jake Camarda was. Punters in general, if we're going to be honest about it, they probably don't get their respect. I mean, think about all that pressure, man. I mean, that is so tough. You got guys banging heads, and now comes the punter on the field. And the only time we notice him is when he screws up. The punt's over his head or he shanks it off his foot. Other than that, you're just like, oh, yeah, that was a pretty good punt. A pretty good punt. Camarda's hanging him 50 yards every game, burying teams, changing field position. That makes all the difference in the world. Field position, such a big part of the game. Listen, I appreciate all of you being here tonight. I've really enjoyed the show. I think you could tell what a pick-me-up it was for me. To talk to Jim Nagy. You can tell he's a guy I've got a lot of. There's guys like that, right? As a reporter, you meet people in your career, sources, coaches, certain players that can just light that fuse, and you go, man, this is why this job is great, because I get to talk to this guy or this person, and you sense the greatness. You sense what makes them special. I've been blessed that way with a lot of coaches, right? Lucky to cover a guy like Tom Izzo. Lucky, I think to cover a guy. I enjoyed Bruce Pearl, thought he was fun. Enjoyed Phil Fulmer at Tennessee. Gene Stallings, you guys know, covered Bama a long time ago. Learned a lot from the man who coached under Paul Bear Bryant and Tom Landry. To me, that is my baseline for football, is Gene Stallings. I'll freely admit that. I was a young reporter, and he took me in and spent a lot of time with me in the coach's office, as did his entire staff. Really learned a lot from those guys. And you kind of see some of that throwback, I think, in Kirby Smart. A lot of the things that Kirby says and does reminds me a lot of Gene. They're both former DBs, right? Gene Stallings was played in the secondary under Paul Bear Bryant. And of course, Kirby played in the secondary at Georgia. They're both guys that have great coaching acumens. Stallings coached under Paul Bear Bryant, as well as the great Tom Landry with the Dallas Cowboys. Kirby spent a lot of time with Saban, also spent some time with Bobby Bowden, and yes, Mark Richt. And certainly Will Muschamp is a guy he's been around and continues to benefit from. So I kind of think there's a lot of similarities. Again, throwback guys, they love their defense, big on field position, not going to do anything on offense that's going to hurt them on defense. And in fact, I would argue that this Georgia defense is the greatest defense in college football since 92 Bama. As it was in the regular season, they allowed fewer points than any team going back to 1986 Oklahoma. That's how dominant this Georgia defense was. You heard Jim Nagy talk about that. You heard him break down the best players. Tomorrow night, Connor in coverage. Connor Riley will come to you. We'll be talking to you about what Kirby Smart says. I assume we're going to get a chance to talk to Kirby. You just know he's going to get asked about the quarterbacks. I can't wait to hear what Kirby says. He means what he says. He says what he means. Sometimes you got to listen here between the lines. Remember what he said last week? He said complacency is ultimately the killer of us all. I thought that was pretty compelling. I was like, man, that is some deep stuff. I'm going to lay in bed at night, think about that, apply that to everything. You're getting complacent with your diet. You're getting complacent with your exercise regimen, getting complacent with your checkbook. You better not be complacent on the football field if you're at Georgia. But Kirby Smart, complacency, ultimately the killer of us all. Let's see what Kirby Smart says tomorrow. Centel Intel, Wednesday night. Don't want to miss that one. And certainly each day, Brandon Adams comes at you with Dog Nation Daily. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Have a wonderful Monday night.